All right, welcome. This is WASA Distance Education, MEL3E, Grade 11 Workplace Math. I'm Pete, I'm your teacher, and welcome to the beginning of our review for the final exam. So this is great. You got this far. That's a great accomplishment, and by now the final exam should not really be a big thing. You should study for it, but really, I think that you're certainly going to be ready for the final exam. Now, we'll just maybe talk just a couple more minutes about the culminating activity here, and then we'll start going over the units. And I'm going to go over each unit because it's been a while, especially Unit 1, Unit 2, and we'll take a look at some of the key questions and some of the course material, and just make sure that everyone understands it. And it's always a good idea to have a refresh. And it's a way that like the way I'm going to show you how to review for the final exam is really a good way to study, right? So whatever you do in the future, if you follow this method of studying, I think you'll be quite successful. All right, but just to kind of wrap things up, so the culminating activity, we want to make that due. You probably look to get that done over the next week or so. If you do 1 page a day, 2 pages a day, it won't take you very long at all, and you get that wrapped up. Okay, so the goal would be to hand it in, not the beginning of next week, but the following Monday. So the 26th. You could leave it a couple extra days into the last week of January, but don't leave it too long because I need that to make your final mark, and I need that to write up your report card. So if you want me to be able to do that, okay? All right. So we got this. So 10% of your final mark, and so these are all the sections that you're going to fill in. Okay. Most of them. The first few, it's just sort of a creative activity to kind of set the stage, to give you a mental model to work with. And then you're going to go and do a little bit of research and some calculations for the various sections. Okay, so that's really what this is all about. And it's a very, very kind of wide-ranging application of a lot of different skills that you picked up in the course. Okay, you'll actually, when you finish this, you should be able to actually do something like that. Maybe with a little help or whatever, but certainly you should be able to come up with something like this for real. All right. Now, I'm just going to highlight the payroll page just in case that sort of went by, because it is a bit of something new. So at some point you're asked here on the payroll page, this is, I don't even know what page number this is, but it's a payroll page. And you're asked to calculate their gross pay, and it tells you how they're paid, so you should be able to do that based on their gross pay. So it's ticket revenue, okay, which I believe you already have it at this point in the activity. Now they're asking you for deductions, and just in case you missed that, I gave you the numbers to use. Okay, so for CPP Canada Pension Plan, the deduction is 1.62%, and so you just find 1.62% of their gross pay, and then you write that in there. For the EI, the employment insurance deduction, it's 1.88% of their gross pay, so you just find that and you write it in there. And then income tax, we decided it was going to be 15%. You find 15% of the gross pay, you put it in there. And then the net pay is just the gross pay minus the 3 deductions. Okay, you subtract the 3 deductions, just like we did in Unit 1. And we'll actually be looking at Unit 1 today anyway, to refresh you on that. Okay, so that's how you do that calculation. In actual business practice, there's 2 ways that happens for very, very small companies. Revenue Canada, Canada Revenue Agency has a website, and you can actually, or they can give you a printed version of it too. It's a booklet that calculates the deductions for you. What you do is you open the booklet up, and it's page after page of money amounts, and you find the page that contains the gross pay that you're looking at, and then there are several columns that tell you what the deduction amount is. Okay, so that's how they do it. You can get that book in print, you can download it. That's actually where I got these numbers. I downloaded the book. But most people nowadays, when they're doing these calculations, almost everyone, they spend some money. It's a few bucks on some small business software, right? Some payroll software and accounting software. It makes it so much easier because not only you basically plug in their pay into the software, and not only does it calculate all their deductions and everything, it actually issues the T4 slips, the T5 slips. Well, no, the T4 slip. It issues your various, it'll you can have it automatically send them a check or automatically deposit money into their accounts. So it does all your accounting for you, and more complex software will even help you with paying. Like it'll keep track of bills that you paid, bills that you need to pay, stuff like that. So that's how it's actually done. Is usually through software. But every once in a while, you might run into a place where they're still doing it by hand, and that's only if you have just a few employees, because this would be very hard to do for more than 3 or 4 employees. It would just take a long time. All right, so that's what I just wanted to sort of point that out. So then you're going to end up with your net page, and then the last little thing here is that your payroll costs is the gross pay, because the net pay is what they get. Okay, that they get the net pay. The government gets all of those deductions, right? So you would have an account with Canada Revenue Agency, and you would send them that money every time you deduct it. Okay, but you get the money coming in, the ticket revenue, all this other stuff. You work out the gross pay for them. That's what you spend. Now, part of it goes to the government and part of it goes to the employee, but still, it's an expense for you, the entire amount of the gross pay. That's why you're adding up this column here, the gross pay, you're not adding up the net pay. Okay, so just making that one clear, because I don't think we've really done something just like this before in the course, so just something a little bit new. Okay, but it's a good insight if you're planning to run a little business, because if you have even one employee, you're going to have to do this for them, right? And this is why I say for 1 and 2 employees, because you have to do this every other week or so if they get paid bi-weekly, as most people do. So, if you have a couple of employees, you could probably sit down and get this all wrapped up in about an hour or so. But if you have like 5 or 6 or 10 employees, it might take you an entire day every 2 weeks to do it, and then that becomes too expensive for your time. Right, so that was it, and yeah. So then the reflection. We got the reflection. Okay, and oh yeah, I may have glossed over the merchandise. There it is. Okay, so you can go on to merchandise, this merchandise website. I'm not sure why they put the Y there, but just go on to Allied Marketing Inc. I think that has some good stuff on it. You can actually you could do a search for custom items, logo t-shirts, stuff like that. And I'd be curious to know if you do use another website. I'd really appreciate it if you'd sort of write down which ones you used, because it seems that we only have that one that we've identified. There's a lot of websites I know about, but they're all in China, and it's a little harder to use them. So this one seems to be American-based or maybe Canadian-based. I try Signatures, and there's quite a few other places if you ask around. Anyone that's ever ordered custom hoodies or something like that for their school or for the band office or for their establishment, will know about a website. We'll be able to tell you where they got those. Okay, so the idea is that you buy the items and then you sell them. Usually, 50, usually double the price, maybe 40 or 50% the price, depending on what it is. Okay, and yeah, so usually it's 30 to 50%. It may seem like a lot, but that's because you're actually have quite a few expenses in selling stuff, right? You have to pay someone, your roadie, whatever, to sell the stuff. You have to get it. You have to bring it around. So anyway, that's the way it works. All right, so that's the culminating activity. If you have any questions all about it, you're welcome to contact me. You can reach me on Facebook, PW Wasa, reach me in the office or by email. And I think I even gave out my cell phone number in the first lesson there. If you look in your um, study guide. So let's just now take a look at. Yeah, I'll save that. Whoops, okay, this was supposed to pop up. There you go. So we're back to Unit 1 now. If you have your Unit 1 handy, that's great. If not, don't worry about it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through Unit 1. I'm going to highlight some of the material, some of the key questions. We'll work through some of those key questions. And if you had any questions, again, you're welcome to contact me. You don't necessarily have to call in for the key questions, but you can certainly let me, if you want to see one done, we have today and then all next week, the 4 classes next week, okay, to do those. Now, by the way, I'll just mention now that Tuesday, it's going to be a pre-recorded class, and we'll be going over some of the material anyway, but Tuesday will be a pre-recorded class just because I'm traveling. Actually, I should be in Sandy Lake on Tuesday. So you won't be able to call in for that one, but all the other ones certainly can do that. Okay. So it may seem like a long time ago, but the Unit 1 was all about money and pay methods, right? How you get paid, the different ways that people get paid, and we've seen a few of those in the culminating activity. And then we also talked about things like deductions, and commissions and quite a few things, and that's why it's important to kind of refresh your memories about that. Okay, one of the things that you'll find knowing how people get paid is it gives you an opportunity. If you're looking at 2 different jobs, you can actually decide which one's a better job for you. If they have different pays, one might have a hourly with overtime, one might have a salary. Okay, but one of the things that I don't know how much we kind of time we spent on it. When you get hourly rate, you get overtime, which sounds pretty good because if they make you come in on the weekend, then you get more pay for it. But one of the benefits of a salary employee is usually you get benefits. Usually you get medical and dental and some life insurance and a pension plan. That's not always the case for hourly workers. So that's something you want to check and you want to ask about what benefits come with the job. Because, it's in your situation, depending on what your situation is, an hourly job that pays less but comes with health insurance or medical benefits might actually be a better deal than maybe a higher paying job that doesn't, right? So you got to look at the big picture, right? And you know what, at the end of the day, a job that you like and a job that's fun, that you enjoy doing, that you're good at, might be better than even the highest paying job that you don't like, right? All right. So, we kind of looked at the different pay periods, and you really need to have that on speed dial. Now, you may wonder what formulas we give you on the final exam. I don't have a sheet handy, but I can tell you the formulas we give you on a final exam. We give you the simple interest formula. We give you the compound interest formula. And let's see, I did have some notes on that. Huh. Okay, seem to have. Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, and let's see, we give you the simple interest, the 2 different versions of it, the compound interest formulas. And then we give you just the one about the fuel consumption, the way to calculate fuel consumption, and the way to calculate cost of fuel. So, and that's really it. I don't think there's any other major formulas to memorize other than those, and so we do give those to you. So if you're not real sure about the compound interest formula, we give it to you, but we don't tell you what each of the variables is, right? So we give you the A equals P times 1 plus I to the power N, but we don't tell you what I is. So you'll have to know that. Okay, and you should, but by now I'm sure that you're doing fine with that. The other thing we don't give you is like the pay periods, how often the pay periods are, how many weeks in a year, how many days in a year. So that's something that you really need to kind of refresh your memory on if it's been a while since you've done that. Okay. So we have a standard, the standard pay periods, and then one of the things that we worked on was the idea that we can calculate different pay for different pay periods. Sometimes we need to convert everything to yearly, right? And that's especially true if we're going from, say, monthly to weekly or bi-weekly, because it doesn't, you think of 4 weeks in a month, but that's not entirely accurate. Okay, so you have to go to yearly and then divide by 52 if you're going from monthly to weekly. Okay, so that was something. We talked about rounding, and I think everyone has that down pretty well by now. So this sort of thing would be kind of helpful for you, being able to answer that question. I don't think anyone had too many problems converting salaries to the different pay periods. So that's what we're looking at there. Now, okay. So then there were quite a few different questions to do with piecework, and let's see, yeah, there's piecework, okay, and a daily rate. So sometimes you get a per diem, a daily pay plus piecework. Sometimes it's just straight up piecework. Okay, and so we worked out how to solve those types of questions. Now, one of the yeah, so we do the we do the piecework type questions. Let's see. Yeah. So you could either have a salary or just a piecework. Oh yes, one of the questions that you might get asked is, what is the advantage and what is the disadvantage of piecework? Now, you got to read a question like that carefully. They might ask you what's the advantage and disadvantage for the employer, okay, or they might ask you what's the advantage and disadvantage for the employee. You have to be careful to read that and underline that, whether it's employer or employee. So for example, if it's an employee, the advantage to piecework is your workers are going to be motivated to work faster, because the more they work, the more money they make. The disadvantage to the employer is that the employees might actually work so hard that they will make more product than what is necessary, right? So that's from the perspective of the employer. Now, what are the advantages and disadvantages of piecework for the employee? Right? Well, again, it's the advantage is you might, again, the harder you work, the more you make. So that's an advantage. But a disadvantage. So, and there's you can say a lot of things. One is if you don't work, you don't get paid, right? So, if you're not feeling well, you go into work and you're well enough to go into work, but you're not feeling all that well, you're going to make less, right? So that's a disadvantage. Another disadvantage might be that if you're really eager one day and you do all this work, and then you go into work the next day and they tell you to go home because they have all the product they need, right? So that's a disadvantage of it, right? That's a disadvantage. So all sorts of disadvantages and advantages. And that's the thing about these types of questions. When they're asking you for your opinion, it's not a right or wrong answer. Okay? It's possible to get the answer wrong, but what we're looking for is an engagement with the course material, right? Thinking about what you've learned in the course, and then kind of answering in that context. Okay? So that's what we're looking for in an opinion question. Okay, so use some language from the course that you learned, use some ideas from the course, and you're going to get the full marks every single time if you do it that way. Okay. Now, some of the piecework questions are kind of, instead of saying they made so many pieces and this is how much they made per piece, This example here near the bottom of page 6 is turning that around where it's saying, okay, he came home, he had $165 in his pocket, right? And somebody said, hey, Max, how many papers did you sell to make $165, right? Or, he said, oh, wow, it was a busy day. I delivered 300 papers, right? And so then you can work out how much he got, right? So it's a per piece. So what I did there when I saw this way back near the bottom of page 6, I put the earnings. We know that the earnings is the number of pieces times the rate. So I filled in what we knew, which was the 165. That was his total earnings in the pieces. So the thing we didn't know was the rate. Okay. So the way you work that out, what we need to do is get the rate all by itself. And one of the sort of the principles of algebra is that if you do something to one side of an equation, an equal sign, as long as you do the other thing, then it doesn't change the equality. So in this case, what I did was I said, all right, if I divide both sides by 300, then we're going to have rate all by itself, and that'll answer the question for us. So down below here, I divided both sides by 300. You can see that, but what I didn't show over here is I actually divided this side by 300. Okay, and the reason is that it's logically you kind of can look at it as just taking the multiply. We're multiplying the 300 times the rate, and if we divide it into the other side, then we end up with the rate by itself, right? But if you really want to see what I did, it's 165 equals 300 times the rate. Okay, so what I did was I divided this by 300 and this by 300. Remember, our goal is to get rid of that 300 sitting in front of rate, to get rate by itself. Well, when you do that, you haven't changed the equation. We divided both sides of the equal sign by the same amount. Doesn't change the equation at all. But what it does for us on this side is it allows us to cancel out that 300, which leaves rate all by itself, and then we can work out what rate is by working out that part on the left. Okay, so I think many of us would just solve an equation like this by inspecting it as well. That's another way of doing it. Right? Okay. All right. So and then that was the answer. Okay. So one of the things that I've been sort of emphasizing throughout the course, this is page 7, the support question, is solving the problems in a logical way and letting the reader, the person who's following along, which could, by the way, be you in a week or a month or a year, letting the reader know what you're doing at each step. Okay, it makes it a lot easier to follow. It organizes it for you because you're sort of plotting your path through the multi-step problem, and it certainly is a kind of it makes it easier for me to mark in a sense that, and I was just yesterday I was marking a question, not from this class, so I can talk about it. I was marking a question, and there was a lot of calculations and a wrong answer at the end, and I sat there for a while trying to figure out where the person went wrong, and so I could sort of point it out to them and see if they had enough of the question to get some marks for it. And the problem is that because it was just a bunch of calculations, I couldn't actually see, what was what. It makes it really hard to give you any marks if the answer's wrong and then the calculations aren't really, don't seem to be following any sequence. Okay, so in this case, because it says salary plus piecework, then I can look at that calculation and I can decide whether that calculation is right or wrong or not. So that way, if this final answer was wrong, at least I can look at each subsection and decide whether or not that's correct, right? So you get some marks for it, okay? And that's the thing, right? We want to be able to give you some marks. If you got off, if the problem went off the rails at some point, And that happens to the best of us. But if I can figure out where it went off the rails and it's only halfway through the problem, well, you're still going to get some marks for that. Okay. All right. So that's why sort of laying out your strategy is a good idea. And of course, the other reason it's a good idea is if you're following the 4-step problem solving method, then the first step, understanding a problem, the second step, make a strategy, make a plan. Okay. And that's part of that, making a plan. Okay. So in this case, we decided that it was a salary plus piecework problem, okay, based on our understanding of the problem. So because of that, then we're able to break it down into steps, calculate the salary, calculate the piecework, and then work out the total. And then because it's a word problem, answer with words. Okay, remember, if it says calculate this, then just calculate this and write the answer. If it gives you a name, if it gives you a story, if it tells you something about the person, then it's a word problem, and you really need to answer in words, as we did here. Okay, and it doesn't have to be complicated. Just use some words to explain the answer. Okay. So there you go. So that's an example of laying it out and kind of showing each step of the way. And that way you get the maximum marks no matter what. Okay. If all I got there is some scribbles and then a number, and the number's wrong, there's really not much to do mark-wise. Okay. Okay. So doing a few of these questions, the support questions, be a good idea. Going back over the key questions that you saw, that you did would be very useful. Are we into the key question already? Yeah, we are into the key questions. Be good. Looking over any of the notes I wrote there. Even if I didn't take some marks off, sometimes I'll write a little note just to kind of, maybe you could do this a little better, or you know, this would be helpful, something like that. So take a little while to go through that. Okay, and then certainly try any of the questions that you were having trouble with. Again, even if you got the right answer, if you struggled with a question, be good to go over it again. Okay, so that would be, if I'm going to give you a tip for studying for the exam, do the questions that you find difficult as your practice. Don't do the questions you find easy, because you're wasting your time, right? And that's really the key to studying for anything. Okay, so spend your time working on the stuff that you're struggling with, and that's hard, right? Human nature. We want to do math questions that we find that are easy, but those aren't the ones where you learn. Okay. So you'll see that there's some common themes in these key questions. You know, this chart where they're showing you, asking you to do monthly pay, semi-monthly, and all that stuff. So make sure you know how to do that. I think most people were doing fine with that. Question 2 pretty much seems to be a repeat of question 1 here, but just make sure that you're able to, like, what is semi-monthly? Is that every other month, or is that twice a month? No. Okay, it's going to be twice a month. Okay, so make sure that you know those down cold. Okay. All right, we got Kim selling newspapers again. I think she's been selling an awful lot of newspapers here, so make sure you know how to do that one. Okay. And so there you go. Okay, so here's an example. I think we asked this question. So for question 6, and this is on page 9, as an employer, what is one advantage and one disadvantage of hiring employees entirely on piecework? Include complete sentences in your answer. So it's worth 2 marks. So we're expecting at least 2 points there. If you really want to make sure that you get, because you know, I don't take marks off for additional points, like for additional. If we ask for 1 of each, and you give me 2 of each, I'm not going to take marks off for that. So if you're not really sure, if you've got a couple of advantages, but you're not really sure if they're good, you put them both down, and then that way, you know, you're going to get the most marks. Okay. So in this case, it asks about employer. Just make sure that you understand whether the question is referring to an employer or an employee. Okay. So it's you or them. Okay. Now this question was pretty straightforward. Just gonna grab the information from the advertisement. Okay. And here, here's an opinion question. Okay, how would you prefer? Okay, so they had some problems. How would you prefer to be paid? So you're gonna pick one, and then say how often, right? And now in this case, question D was benefits. When we talk about benefits, these are things like vacation, pension, medical. So one somebody might say a benefit is learning a new skill. That's not when we use the word benefits in the context of a job. It that's we're talking about extra goodies that come with the job, not really training. It's not really wouldn't normally count in one of the benefits. Okay, vacation, pension, medical insurance, life insurance, the use of a car, stuff like that. That would really be a benefit. Okay. And so then this whole section was about looking at a job advertisement and just looking at the different pieces of the job. Typically, you want to look at the salary. You want to look if you're trained, if you have enough training or qualifications for the job. And, sometimes it can be really hard to tell what they're looking for. Sometimes they ask for stuff that maybe you don't have, but you still think you're a good fit for the job. I suggest that you apply anyway, right? Even if all you get out of it is an interview, it's still a good thing. It's a good thing to go on interviews. Gives you experience doing those. Okay. And one of the questions that was asked in the key questions: would this job provide you with enough income for the lifestyle you would like? Lifestyles of the rich and famous, right? Could you afford a house? That's if you want to buy a house. Could you afford a vehicle if you want? Trips, right? Why or why not? Now, what we're talking about here is the lifestyle you want to make, right? Not the lifestyle that, we see on TV or whatever. So, for example, what's important to me, like me personally, right? Okay, well, I got a house, but it's not a very big house. It's actually a tiny house. Okay, I have a vehicle, but actually, I got two, but they're old. They're like really old. They're really, really old. I don't need a new vehicle. Trips? Nah, I don't go on trips. So, you see, that's the thing, right? Is what we're looking for is enough money to do what we want to do, what we want to do, not what some other people think that, um, is good to do. Some people like to travel. That's what they live for. And that's great. So they save all their money. Right? Okay. Now, and then decide which pay period you would prefer. And again, what we're looking for here, there's no right or wrong answer. You might prefer to be paid monthly, but give me a reason for it. Okay. Okay. So maybe you prefer having that bigger pile of cash, right? Some people find that a disadvantage because they tend to spend all their money if they have a big pile of cash. So in that case, if you're in that category, you probably want to get paid weekly so that every week you get a smaller pile of cash. And then if you spend it all in 1 week, well, that's okay. You're going to get some more in a few days, right? So yeah, that's really what you're going to have to decide. And what we're looking for there is an explanation that makes sense. Okay, that makes sense in terms of what you learned in the course. Okay, not a right or wrong answer. Okay, so commission hourly rate. So this is really lesson 1 and lesson 2. It's just one big lesson. You can think of it as that way. The commission and hourly rates start to get complicated because there's your pay rate depends on how many hours you've worked, and it can go up. So the hourly rate, if you're given an hourly rate, for example, this is on page 12. So you're earning $11 an hour. Okay. Now there's a typical work week that we get. It's usually 35, 37, 40 hours, depending on the position. Okay. So if this in the example, Lee works 35 hours a week, we just multiply the hourly rate by the number of hours, and we get the amount that Lee earns per week. Now that's gross, of course, not, we haven't done any deductions yet, but usually when we're talking about pays, we're talking about gross pay, which maybe we shouldn't, because what you actually take home is a lot less, but that's, when we're talking about how much people earn, how much people's salaries are, what a job pays, we're always talking about gross pay. Okay. Now, this example, the second example, is where there's overtime pay, and it's typically time and a half, which is 1.5 times. That's time plus a half time, right? So if she makes $10 an hour, 1.5, she's going to get $10, and then half of that, $5. So 10 plus 5 is 15. She's going to get $15 an hour for any hours that she works overtime. Now this is where it gets tricky, okay? The way that they lay it out here in this question is the way I like to see it calculated. It's a very logical way, and you can't go wrong if you follow this way. The first thing you do is work out their overtime rate. Okay, so it's just their $10 an hour, or whatever their hourly rate is, times the overtime rate, which is usually time and a half, so that's 1.5. Every once in a while it might be double time, which is 2, right? So instead of 1.5, it would be 2. So if it says double time, that would be 2 times the regular rate, but typically it's 1.5, okay, which is time and a half. Okay, now here's the tricky part, and if you're going to do some studying, study this right here, page 12. Okay, B, example, the second example, B. Okay, what we have here is the calculation for overtime hours. Okay, when you're working on an overtime situation, they get their regular pay up until they go beyond their regular working hours. So in the question, it says any hours she works beyond 40 are considered overtime, which means that the first 40 hours are regular time. So when we're working out the overtime hours, we only work out the overtime rate on the number of hours that are above her regular number of hours. Okay? So Robin works 45 hours. Her regular hours are 40, so those 5 extra hours, and you can see here we worked it out. We took her number of hours she worked, subtracted her regular hours, and it's always that same calculation. Total number of hours minus the regular hours is the overtime hours. In this case, it's 5 extra hours she worked. That's where she's getting her overtime pay. Okay, so she doesn't get overtime pay for the first 40 hours. So the way I like to work it, I find what the overtime rate is. I find what the overtime pay is. So it's the overtime hours times the overtime rate. That's the overtime pay. Okay, then we got to go back and work out her regular hours. Now you could do that first if you want, but I like to do it in this order. It doesn't matter, and I'm not gonna take any marks off if you do it the other way, because you're welcome to do it any way you want, as long as it makes sense, right? But I'm just telling you that this is a way that I think is pretty logical. So we've got the overtime, and then we work out the regular, and the trick here is that you take her regular number of hours, which is always given in the question, times her regular rate of pay, and then we get the regular pay. So now we have 2 numbers. We have the overtime pay and the regular pay. We're just going to add them together, and that's your total. Okay. So a lot of times these problems have multiple steps, right? Now in this case, they gave you 4 different sub-questions, A to D, to kind of guide you along. But in a lot of cases, they don't do that. They just give you the scenario, and then you have to do the 4 steps. So in that case, what I suggest you do is you use some labels, and you kind of show the steps. Whoops. All right. Well, I thought I had one handy. Okay. So, and they even do it in the text here. Okay. Now, so if you're feeling a little, maybe a little dodgy about doing these, you can try some of these support questions, and remember that the answers are in the back of the unit. Okay, so if you're in Unit 1, the answers are in the back of Unit 1 for the support questions. Okay, so you can try a few of them. I suggest you only try a few, check your answers, and then if you're getting them all right, then don't waste your time. Work on stuff that, study stuff that you're having trouble with. Okay, or some new stuff. Okay. Now, commission is, it starts to get into a lot of calculations here, but basically commission is, it can be, sort of similar to calculating overtime, where there might be some steps to do. Now, before we did commission, we actually did percentage. We worked out how to find percentages, and I think by now, hopefully that'll be second nature. You basically take the percentage, divide it by 100, okay, and you turn it into a decimal. That decimal you multiply. If you want to find a percent of a number, then you're going to take that decimal percent, multiply it by the number, and the answer you get, that is the percent. So in this case, 13% of 2,000 divided by 100, you get 0.13. Put that in your calculator, multiply 0.13 by 2,000. You get 260, and that is 260 whatever. If this was dollars, then it's $260. That's 13% of 2,000. Okay. Now, sometimes you're going to be given mixed fractions like this, 3.25%. And off to the side, I tried to explain that what this really means is 3 plus a quarter, which means that you can divide that out on your calculator. 1 divided by 4, you get 0.25. Add the 3 back, and you get 3.25. You see? So that's 3.25%, and then you still have to convert that to a decimal. Okay. Another way of doing it is just to memorize these standard fractions. 1/4 is 0.25. A half is 0.5, and 3/4 is 0.75. Okay, I'm not really sure what I was doing over here. Okay, so if they give you 3.5, then that's 3.5, right? Because a half is 0.5. So you might be able to do it that way. Okay. Okay, so they were just asking for some calculations of percentages. You can try those. Okay. And so here's question 4 here. It says, Carrie is a real estate broker who earns 4.25%. So it's 4 plus a quarter, which is 0.25. So it's 4.25%. We're going to divide it by 100. Whoops. To get a decimal, it's 0.0425. Watch it, eh? When they're small percentages, if they're less than 10, you're going to have a 0 after the decimal point, 0.0425. Okay, pretty common source of error is to miss that leading 0. Okay, so if the percent is less than 10, you're going to have that leading 0 there. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Carrie is a real estate broker who earns 4.25% commission on the selling price of every house she sells and an annual salary of $50,000. How much does she earn in 1 month? If she sells a house for $318,000. So that could be a pretty typical kind of deal for a real estate broker. They work really hard, and they work late at night. They're showing people houses on the weekends. Basically, when I've worked with real estate agents or brokers, anytime I wanted to look at a house, they were always there. It didn't matter whether it was early in the morning, late at night. They'd be there. And so what they do is they get a commission to reward them when they sell a house, but they also get a salary in some cases because they don't sell a house every month, right? Maybe I don't think too many people buy houses in January, especially the beginning of January. It's cold and everyone's tired from Christmas and the holidays, and so that just helps them to sort of have a little bit of income, even if they're not selling houses. And then maybe in the fall, in the spring, they might sell 3 or 4 houses in a month. Okay, so let's see how we're going to do this. I solved this problem down below here. So the way it worked, I converted the 4.25 percent into a decimal percent. Then I took that, divided it by 100, and I got my actual decimal. Okay, so it's important when you're converting from a mixed fraction, that first conversion just gets it into a percent that you can then use in your calculator to find the dead decimal equivalent. So her commission then is 0.425 times the 318,000 that she sold the house for. She doesn't get the 318,000. All right, that the seller of the house gets that, but she does get a commission, which is it's $13,515. Now it seems like a lot of money, but again, she's probably worked for a month to get that, maybe 2 months to get that, right? So then her monthly salary, we have to work out. She earns an annual salary of $50,000, and that's the thing about these questions. When you're solving questions, you want to understand what the numbers they're giving you mean, right? When they give you 50,000, right, what they were talking about here was her annual salary. But then it wants to know how much is you earn in 1 month. So you have to say to yourself, can I take that number I was getting at 50,000 and turn it into a monthly salary? Do I have to do anything else to it? In this case, you can just divide it by 12, right? And so that's her monthly salary. So then you're going to add up her commission plus her salary, because that's how she gets paid, and that's how much she makes in 1 month. Okay, that seems like a lot of money, doesn't it? But she works really, really hard for that, and she might not sell a house every month. Okay, so it's one of those jobs. If you value routine and you value just kind of having a steady paycheck, the same amount every week, every other week, real estate's not not the life for you, right? Because her income might be really high 1 month and then really low the next, or low for a few months and then she'll sell a lot of houses. So it's a really kind of a different kind of job. Now, if you're a people person and you like that sort of thing, it can be a great career. Okay. You have to be a little good at math, but you have to be a little good at everything for real estate, I think. Okay, so here we get into the calculations where we're doing the time and a half type questions. And so here's an example. Whoa. Where question 2, overtime pay, regular pay, and total pay for each situation. So this is actually not a bad thing to try. This is key question 2. So you can look back on yours that you did and see how you did on that and any corrections, because usually at this point in the course, if you're having problems with this, I'll usually give you some pretty extensive notes with the question. Okay, so that's something, if you looked at your marks maybe, and then you just saw your mark, that's one thing, but actually going in and looking to see what I said about it, and any kind of tips I gave you would be useful. All right, so this is a typical scenario then. They're giving you 40 hours as your regular, time and a half, which is 1.5. And then they want all of the stuff, the overtime, the regular, and the total, which is exactly the steps that we asked for in that previous question. So there wasn't a lot of room here, so I didn't do a lot of writing, but I did the overtime rate, 1.5 times the hourly rate. So that was the overtime rate, you see. Now the overtime is always going to be the same. It's the total hours worked minus the regular hours. So we're only calculating overtime on the excess hours, not the overtime hours, not the regular hours. Okay, it makes sense, because the point of overtime pay is to compensate someone who's coming in on Saturday morning when they don't normally work Saturday morning, someone that has to work from 10 till midnight to cover part of a shift when they normally work in the day. It's to compensate them for time that they would normally have free to spend at home. Maybe the guy was going to go fishing on Saturday morning, and his boss called him in and said, "Look, really, we need you, down at work." And so then he's making, instead of making $11.25 an hour, he's making $17 an hour. Okay, so the idea then is that maybe, he has to spend his fishing Saturday working, but the next time he goes fishing, he's going to have a much, much nicer fishing rod, right? Because he's got more money to spend on it, right? So that's the idea anyway. All right, once you get the overtime pay, don't forget that you also have to work out the regular pay, and this is critical here. You're working out the regular pay at the regular rate, okay? And you're using the regular hours in that calculation. And so the regular hours are always given in the question, okay? So then you work that out, and then you just add them up. You add the overtime, you add the regular, and you get the total. Okay, so you can try a few of those, or just look over your notes and make sure that you got that. Okay. So, one of the things here, we're sort of running out of time here for today. When I come back on Monday, this is Thursday, isn't it? Wow. So when I come back on Monday, I'll pick up this one right here. You want to make sure you know how to do this one. This is a little complicated because there's two different commission rates. Okay, so there's a sort of a commission bracket. So that's where I'll keep going from then on Monday, and I guess we just kind of leave it here for now. So if you have any questions about anything, you want to see any questions done, just let me know, and I'll be happy to put them in the review. All right, well, thanks for joining us today. Talk to you on Monday. Okay. Right. Yep.
We can go when we want to, night is young and so am I. And we can just feel neat from our hearts to our feet and surprise them with a picture cry. Say we can act if we want to, if we don't, nobody will. And you can act, build, do, totally remove it like you can.